Indicators and Performance. She is the head of the Government Indicators and Performance Division in the Director of Public Governance at OECD. And she has been in charge of this particular project for 5 years, Monica, is that fair? Yeah, she conceptualized it, and then she executed it, and then she refined it, then she executed it again. So that's exciting. There I see Srikant Sastry himself. Srikant is the lead advisory partner at Cherry Bekaert and is our sponsor. And Srikant, if you would, a few words to kick off this this element of the trust project, please.
Absolutely. Good morning, Ed, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be associated with such an important endeavor, and that is, the quest to understand the issues around trust and how we can shore up trust in government. Whether it's through issues of transparency or integrity. I know we're certainly supportive of the OECD framework and the work being done in that vein, but we had a really good set of sessions at the recent AGA conference focused on trust, and I think that there's a lot of receptivity to measures that we can all take to shore up this matter. So pleasure to be here and happy to participate.
Well, thank you for your sponsorship. Let me now turn this over to Monica to present the second of the biennial trust surveys. There will be more. She promises there'll be more. We don't know how many. She's haven't told us how many yet. But Monica, let me turn this over to you.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you for the introductory. I'm very pleased to be here, and so maybe I will share my screen so that you can see the results. Let me see.
Beautiful.
Okay. Can you see it? Okay, fantastic. So good morning, good afternoon, and many thanks for this invitation. I'm really pleased to provide you with the main findings of this second OECD survey on drivers of trust in public institutions that we launched a few days ago on the 10th of July. And the survey itself was carried out in 30 countries between October and November 2023. So just as a word of introduction, I think that you see from the title that we chose for this report, Building Trust in a Complex Policy Environment. Indeed, we are in a highly polarized environment in which a growing number of people are dissociating from traditional democratic processes. So strengthening trust is a priority for many countries around the world. And trust allows to bring people together and is necessary to design and implement policies. So what this survey aims to do is to better understand what drives people's trust in institutions in our countries, and how can trust be strengthened or rebuilt. So I will show you the main results and the trends for these 30 OECD countries. Of course, each country then has specific results that need to be interpreted with their own data. However, we also see, and this will be my main message, we also see overall tendencies affecting all OECD countries and common areas of action for OECD governments that I would be happy to discuss with you. In general, what the 2024 Trust Survey confirms is that process underpinning democratic governance need to be strengthened. So ensuring that all people voices are heard, that we strengthen checks and balances among the institutions, using better, transparent and verifiable evidence in decision making, and balancing the interests of a diverse population. So these are the best levers to improve trust, especially in national governments today, and we'll see how. So turning to the results, regarding the overall trust levels, trust in national government has slightly eroded since 2021, but not drastically fallen. And this despite increasing concerns about the cost of living, but also war in Europe and Middle East. Here you see that 39% on average report high or moderately high trust in government, and 44%, so a higher share, instead report low or no trust in the national government. Obviously, you also see here that results vary across OECD countries, and in fact, also when we look at the changes over time, so between 2021 and 2023, and here you see the 18 countries where these data are comparable, because these are the countries that participated in both the two rounds of the trust survey. You see that while on average, as I said, trust levels decline slightly, this instead comes from very different behavior across countries. So you see that, for example, trust increased substantially in Colombia, in Australia, Canada, France, Latvia, and Sweden, while there were larger decrease in trust in other countries such as Finland, Korea, or Norway. We know also that levels of trust depend on respondent individual characteristics. And what I want to point out here is that the sense of agency affects trust levels greatly. So you see here that on average, among those who report that they don't have a say in what the government does, 22% have high trust. While among those who feel that they do have a say in what the government does, this share of high trust is 69%. So there is a trust gap, if we want to call it like this, of 47 percentage points that is due to a sense of political agency. And in fact, the trust in public institutions varies more depending on the individual's sense of political agency than any other socioeconomic and demographic characteristics that we see, whether this is age, gender, education, and income, although there is still a relatively large trust gap of 17 percentage points that you see here, depending on the financial well-being of respondents. At the same time, when we see changes since 2021, I think that the most important elements to underline are that there is an increase in gap, in the gender gap and the education gap, due to the fact that women and lower educated people have the largest decrease in trust in national government compared to 2021. The age gap, we know that usually on average, young people trust the government less than older generations. However, this gap has decreased between 2021 and 2023. So now turning instead to not so much on the evolution of the trust levels, but to the part of work that I think is most interesting. It is the one regarding understanding what drives this trust in government and in other public institutions that we monitor, such as public administration or civil service, parliament, courts, police, etc. So when we look at these drivers, what we have done this time is to separate the trust that is relative to the day-to-day interactions between citizens and public institutions, and trust that is related to how governments make their decision on long-term complex policy issues. So first, I now focus on the day-to-day interactions between citizens and public institutions. We note that Importantly, they remain an essential driver of trust, and today current satisfaction levels are relatively robust and help maintain trust levels. For example, although there are significant variations across countries, overall a majority continues to be satisfied with public services such as health, education, and administrative services. They also trust that public agencies will use their personal data only for legitimate purposes, which is of course very important in our digital societies. So on these relatively good results on day-to-day interactions, doesn't mean that we should slow down efforts in these areas. First, because as I will show in a moment, they remain an important driver of trust, but also because there is room to increase trust by improving the responsiveness, the openness, and integrity in these interactions. In fact, you know, just to give you a couple of examples, and the trust, the survey has many more. You see here that 40% believe that they cannot voice their opinions on matter at the local level. This is the graph on the left, the yellow part. And similarly, on the right, you see that a similar share, 43% actually, find that it unlikely that the government employee would refuse a bribe to speed up a service. Similarly, we find that fewer than 40% think institutions adopt innovative ideas to improve services or improve public services following complaints. So there is room for improvement in the area of responsiveness, openness, innovation in public services. And now, with these slides, what we have done is when we look at all the day-to-day interactions with citizens, we analyze the drivers of trust together with the areas where actions will bring the most trust dividends, depending on current satisfaction. So this allows us to identify areas of focus for greater impact for different levels of government. And this is a encompassing analysis. So we are looking at the OECD countries total or average. So altogether, what we see is the following. First, we see that the big opportunity for improving trust in local government, so the second arrow, if you want, is in improving the capacity of citizens to voice their opinion on policy matters that affect their local community. Second, we also see on the top arrow that there are many levers for improving trust in the civil service. So day-to-day interactions are really important to improve trust in the civil service. And these include continuing to work on improving satisfaction with services, ensuring that people perceive that public employees treat everybody fairly and that their personal data is used only for legitimate aims. Also, integrity standards come high on the agenda, as you see from this figure. Third, we also see that there is a potential impact of day-to-day interactions on trust in national government, even if this is smaller than on trust in the civil service and local government. However, improving service satisfaction, the perception of legitimate data use, and the fair treatment can also play a role in maintaining and improving trust. So this is for the part, let's say, on the day-to-day interactions. And now, if we move instead on long-term and complex issues, there we find more skepticism on trust in policy making on long-term and complex issues. And this is actually what is driving levels of trust down. To show you this, here you see that on the first graph that we see that there is a majority, 53%, that are confident in the capabilities of governments for emergency preparation. And this is a very important indicator and obviously may signal also sort of a positive legacy of the COVID crisis. However, a sense of insecurity is evident when people are asked about their confidence in government's capacity to address complex policy challenges with trade-off among population groups or generation. For example, you see that only 42% are confident that countries can reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, only 41% that governments can regulate new technologies and artificial intelligence and help business and people to use those responsibly. And even less, 37% are confident that the government adequately balance the interest of current and future generations. So obviously, taking decisions on issues with large unknowns is inherently difficult. And so it's not surprising that some of the perception on the capabilities of government on complex issues and long-term decision-making are less positive than on day-to-day interactions between government and citizens. However, what we found with the survey is that this lack of confidence is at least partly attributable to the lack of confidence that institutions work in the public interest. They are accountable to each other and they allow citizens to have a voice. Here you see that the public remains deeply skeptical that governments always act in the public interest and with integrity. Only 30% think that the government would refuse a corporation demands that is against public interest. It can be harmful to society as a whole. And in the same manner, only 30% believe that the current political system allow people like them to have a say in what the government does. You see also in this graph on the right how these variables, so the perception of the public of having a voice in the current political system is highly correlated with trust in the national government at the country level. Importantly, is also that handling complex policy issues requires that citizens perceive that the government is making decisions based on the best and robust evidence. But here again, we have around 41% on average, and you see also the values for the different countries. So on average, only 41% think that the government relies on the best available evidence when taking decisions. It's also important to note that with other questions, we also see that that only 23% think that the government provides statistics that allow to verify what whether the government keeps its promises. So there is also sort of a skepticism towards government-based or government-provided statistics. This, as I will underline in a moment, but this variable on the perception of use of evidence in policy making is today the biggest driver of trust in national government. So a very important variable, especially when we know that government evidence competes also with other sources of information, which are crucial in democracy. And we see that in general, the use by people of a diversity of media sources helps build trust, and also clear and reliable government communication can also cement trust in government. So when we carried out the same analysis that I showed you before for the day-to-day interaction, instead on the variables that are related more on complex long-term policy issues, what we found is the following. The first thing to highlight is that on average, actions to improve decision-making on complex matters are likely to bring more impact on trust than actions on day-to-day interactions with government. This is especially true at national government level, so the bottom arrow that you have in this figure. In particular, if we look at that bottom arrow, improving citizen perception on government ability to address intergenerational issues, on the evidence that they use in their decision-making, on ensuring citizens have a voice, will have a particularly large impact on trust level. These are the variables that you see on the right end of this arrow. Other actions to strengthen democratic governance will also have an impact, such as the capacity of parliament to hold the government accountable and the capacity of government to withhold undue influence when it takes decisions and communicates about these reforms well. So we find also similar levers for improving trust, both for the local government and the civil service, although with slightly less impact. So all these variables that you see here, that I haven't shown you the results, obviously in the report, you find all the results for each country on all the variables shown here. So what are the main conclusions for policy action to enhance trust in public institutions? We identify 5. So the first that comes very strongly is to engage better with citizens and to enhance trust, as we saw, both in national and local governments, and make this engagement meaningful for decision making. So this will require setting clear expectations about the role of deliberative, consultative, and direct democracy, as well as improving the mechanism through which governments give all people a voice and are responsive to these voices. A second area of action is to strengthen the ability to transparently address complex policy challenges in the public interest. This will be key to improving trust, especially in the national government. Related to the above, countries need to support a healthy information ecosystem and invest in evidence-based communication. Promoting a healthy, diverse, and independent media environment remains key, and you find in the report some results in this area. Communicating on the evidence, research, statistics that inform government decisions, and also how they affect the public, but also making sure that this evidence can be verified and has solid and transparent governance behind, should bring trust dividends as well. Fourth, and this has an impact for all the institutions, including civil service, continue to invest in improving perceptions of integrity, so both in daily interactions and in complex decision making. So trust in all institutions would benefit from clear rules and implementation related to integrity, lobbying, influence, but also anti-corruption. In the same manner, strengthening checks and balances in the political system is also likely to help build trust. And the final point, which is the first one that I show, is really important for government to continue to invest in reliable, responsive, and fair public services, especially to enhance trust in the civil service and the local government. So these are the five main policy actions that we have presented in the report, already discussed with member OECD countries that participated in the survey, and we look forward to continue this conversation. And our next appointment will be in October in Italy, where the OECD is organizing this global forum on building trust and reinforcing democracy, where the results of the OECD Trust Survey will serve as input for discussion among the policymakers, civil society representatives, international organizations, and so on, to discuss what are the policy actions that can be designed and implemented to strengthen trust and reinforce democracy. Thank you very much. Here is also the link to where you can find all the results and the report, and I look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Monica, thank you very much. You've come a long way with this report over the years, from the simple, almost, easily understood aggregate of this country trusts more than that country trusts. What were the surprises to you in this particular report as compared to the prior report? So what kind of said, oh my goodness, this is really different, or this is really outstanding in this report?
Thank you, Ed. You know the work pretty well. So just to say, maybe for those who are less familiar with the work, so the previous report, so the previous survey took place at the end of 2021. So towards, in 2 years into the COVID crisis, and on 22 OECD countries. While this time, the survey took place at the end of 2023 and enlarged the sample to 30 countries, of which 20 were repeating, let's say. So I would say that the first surprising results that maybe is counterintuitive is that I think that the trust levels, I was surprised that given the current political and economic environment for OECD countries and the world as a whole, trust levels actually didn't collapse. So for me, that was a kind of, if I may say, a positive. Obviously, it's not positive. The level of trust are still relatively low, but a positive result. This survey confirmed a number of aspects, including the aspect of lack of participation and representation. These are really issues that countries need to address. What I found a bit surprising, the importance of this aspect related to evidence in decision making. So the fact that public expect to be able to understand what, how the decisions have been made, what is the evidence on which so this is the variable that has the largest impact on trust levels in national government, and maybe that was a bit surprising.
We know that this particular group is very shy and retiring, but if you have questions for Monica, if you would please put them in the chat, and we will. I've got someone who's monitoring the chat at this point. Amanda is monitoring the chat, and we'll give those questions out after I do my next two. I have two more questions for Monica, and then we go to the chat. The next one is actually a slight variant of the one that I'd given you earlier, because you answered the question in your slides. The question was, what are the implications for policy? I'm really going to put you on the spot here, but if we took each of those 5 implications, and you don't have to do all of them, just you can just do the ones that you like. But if we took each of those 5 implications, which countries have given us a model? So you talked about engagement. How do we engage people? Where do we look for a model for each of those 5 policy implications? Because I think that's really important. Citizen engagement is not something anybody told us we ever had to do, in a sense. We listen to the voice of the public. We listen to it in elections. We listen to it in forums. But we've never, in my experience, we've never sought out that information along the way.
Yes, that's very important, and indeed, this is the most important aspect also for countries, to be able not only to to be able to share their practices, understand what works where, have also a sort of an assessment of these practices, and understand how they can be adapted in different contexts, because obviously all these has also to be taken into account, the institutional, political, economic context of each country. Having said that, We have already a number of examples of things that countries have put in place. We have also a number of practices that countries that, or plans, if you want, that countries intend to put in place as a response to these results, and we will discuss this in the global forum in October that I mentioned before. However, just to give you one example, maybe because it comes from Finland, which is a very high trusting country, has always been. However, already the previous survey in 2021 showed a sort of paradox where people were trusting, but at the same time, their political agency was low. So they felt that actually they didn't have a say in what the government does. So they already in 2021 tried to address this with what they called national policy dialogue. That was something that they neutralized from the lockdown dialogues that they had initiated during lockdown, during the COVID lockdown, in order to better understand the concerns of different groups of population involved, different groups of population where they live. So going also in local governments, understanding what are the concerns, what are the expectations. And so that has become a sort of something that they do regularly, and also that they have then to report to Parliament on these results. And just to add one point on this that I found very interesting, Finland discussed this experience already last year. And following that discussion, they actually, Latvia, a country that instead has a much lower level of trust in public institutions, adopted the same practice. And with the help of Finland, they actually designed a similar system of seeking out for citizens' inputs and comments. And so now these are two countries, for example, that have a similar practice, and we will see obviously the results in the next years to come.
That's excellent, and I want to thank you for this presentation, and I look forward to the October discussion of policy implications, because you're really setting out a roadmap for a lot of change. This is not we should say, it's not your father's Oldsmobile, it's not your father's old car. This is a new map. When you think forward to 2025, the next survey, how will you change that survey to reflect what you found in 2023?
Yeah, so this is part of the conversation that we have together with the participating countries. So to make sure that the survey on one hand remains stable, just for to be able to monitor changes over time, and so with a set of core questions, but at the same time that is open to innovation, so that remains also relevant. And so just to give you an example, last time, following the results of the 2021 survey, there was a number of discussions with countries that brought us to introduce a number of new questions in this survey. The ones around the question on evidence, use of media, media habits, information environment in general, and indeed these were important questions that we hadn't addressed before, and because of these results, we thought that it was important also to set in place a number of questions to understand the role of information and also disinformation, obviously.
I urge you all to go back and read the survey. I've actually read it twice now. And things like media, Monica did not touch on, but they're very telling. The extent to which an individual gets his or her information from the internet as compared to print significantly impacts the amount of trust they have along the way. So just an example of some of the insights that are still there. I'm going to switch now. We've got some good questions in the in the chat. Oops, there's another one. We have a good questions in the chat. I'm going to start with John Kaminsky's question. And John, I'm going to preface this by saying there's always a discussion going on between the United States and OECD about potential United States participation in the survey. John asks, this U.S. isn't included in this survey. Is there a survey that might provide comparative context? The Pew Charitable Trust, University of Michigan Research Center, and I'll add Gallup as well. We've got some Gallup work coming that came up in the last session, and we'll have some from the Partnership for Public Service in our next session in September. But Monica, given the fact there's the absence of the United States, have you as a PhD in statistics looked at the United States and what statistics in the US may help us understand trust here?
Yes, so there are obviously other surveys. You mentioned Pew Trust, Gallup, etc. Maybe the main difference is that the survey, the OECD Trust Survey, really focus on what are the drivers of trust in terms of public governance drivers. And so try to understand, to focus on those, so to provide some actionable data on what public administrations and governments can do to improve trust. So in that sense, while you have obviously similar questions regarding the levels of trust or population groups that you find, and then clearly then there are, national wide for the US specific surveys that go in depth in some aspect that we don't clearly, but that's, I would say, it's the main difference. And so it would be great obviously to have also the US, as you saw, out of the 38 OECD countries, 30 participate, and there are different reasons for countries to be able to participate or not to participate in the survey. In any case, the survey is now, a tool for the OECD, for OECD countries. So we aim at covering all the OECD countries in the future.
That's great. Steve Goodrich, I'm going to ask you to unmute. You have a very good question, but I think we would be better served by you asking it directly rather than me trying to interpret it. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Ed. It's a little bit of a long one. I was thinking about something I was reading yesterday, where your work is great, and it appears to be based on citizen survey, I assume. And this particular article was citing that 30% of legislation that is 30% legislation is passed that is highly desirable by most US citizens. Conversely, 30% of legislation that gets passed is not desirable by US citizens, leading the author to conclude that the desires of citizens are not considered in Congress when addressing legislation. Do you look at and include research like that?
So we do include a number of questions. First of all, we include also the level of trust in different institutions, including Congress or parliaments in European countries, national parliaments. But we also include a number of questions related, two questions. One is the one that I showed, at least partially, that has to do with whether people feel that the parliament holds the government accountable on a specific policy or budget decision. The second one is instead whether people believe that the parliament balances interest of different population groups and different regions. So that also is and the answer, if you want, on average, it is a little bit higher than this, but not so. So it's around 37%, if I remember correctly, think that the the parliament balances the interest of a diverse population adequately, let's say this way. So this is and then we look at the correlation that that variable has with trust in parliament, but also trust in government. And what you find is yet again that it's not just obviously that you tend to trust the parliament more if you also believe that as a balanced way of the different interests, but also you tend to trust the government more if the parliament is functioning according to this. Maybe the only thing, because we had a discussion also, I mean, the only thing it's whether, you know, how do you interpret this 30% that you mentioned, you know, that you can say, well, so that means that actually the Congress is not responding to the majority of citizens, or instead the 30%. So this is obviously a more complicated way of interpreting this only 30%, or because it may mean a different thing. For example, when we presented the results for France, the reactions of public officials was they were very surprised and in a sense upset that only 38% thought that the national parliament, the Assemblée in France, thought that was keeping the government accountable. They thought that there was a kind of like a failure in the way, and in other countries they thought that, well, 38% is, you know, it's not so bad. So the interpretation really depends.
All right, thank you, Monica.
Oh, unmute.
Question is there from the chat? Is there any idea what Switzerland is doing that creates such high trust levels of positive perception relative to other countries? That's from Nick Hart.
Yes, Switzerland has very positive results on many of the indicators. What we also see in terms of this, instead, generally speaking, low level of voice or perceived voice from citizens, and a large, very large majority in all countries with a request of more direct ways of deliberative democracy. And so probably the aspect that Switzerland has an established way with a referendum is something that most likely is a positive factor on these results.
Okay. Other questions, ladies and gentlemen? I'm down to my last question.
Ed Gavin has his hand raised.
I'm sorry. Let's go to him. I can't tell you what, just unmute and start your question.
Thank you, Ed. I thought I would just jump in here and say hi to Monica. My name is Gavin Ugali. I'm the Executive Director of the Program Integrity Alliance, but I also spent 10 years at the OECD. So Monica, it's nice to see you here and to hear about the new survey, and it's impressive as always. So congratulations on this work. I wanted to just maybe ask one question about, I guess you could kind of call it the far right side of the theory of change in terms of trust. And I think everybody on this call understands almost intuitively the value of trust. But have you done any work, or have you looked into it all, the drivers of not just trust, but how trust is a driver of other things, democracy, and you talk about participation. So if there's anything you could say kind of on that end of the spectrum as, you know, trust as a driver, as opposed to the drivers of trust. And then the other question I had, just to go back about to the U.S.
Kevin,
context.
let me interrupt. I just wanted to put a little bit of a twist on that. Monica, also you've done data that looks at political participation and the nature of the left-right dichotomy for those folks. So perhaps you could add that as well. Gavin, back to you. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and then maybe just one small addition. I know that the trust survey doesn't focus on the U.S., but I was wondering if you could just share your opinions on the extent to which some of the concepts that you deal with in the survey do in fact apply to state level governments in the U.S., or if there's any differences or words of caution that you might have applying the concepts at that level. Thanks, Monica.
Yes, so on the first one, yes, we have a lot of research and literature on the role of trust as an input, let's say, for and a foundation, obviously, for better functioning democracies and more resilient democracies. Work that comes from OECD, but that comes from many other sources, including on the even on the economic aspect of it, on reducing transaction cost, helping with implementing policies or taxation, etc., to well-being in general, since in a sense, really trust brings people together, and so this is a sort of the foundation for a society that can work and function. So I think that we have a bit of work done by us and a lot of work that we use done by others. So there are a number of references, both in the report that I just presented, but also in the previous one and in some papers that we have on the website I can indicate to you. We don't focus on that because I mean, for us, really, what interests us is also to look at trust as an outcome of good public governance and democratic governance. So for us, the focus is to see trust as the ultimate, if you want, outcome indicator of democratic governance, and so and the objective for public officials to work on increased trust and build trust with citizens. So that's the reason why we look at that, if you want, at that direction of the chain. But obviously we are aware of that the fact that both direction works is also a confounding factor, if you want. So when we look at correlation, obviously these are correlation, and so if you have really good levels of trust, that would help in having a better perception of integrity of institutions, etc., etc. So we look at both sides, if you want. For your second question on the state level, I mean, generally speaking, this concept obviously apply to the US. As an OECD countries, the US also participated in all the discussion building this survey. So in a sense, are part and behind this formulation or this framework, if you want. We do ask few questions related to state level or regional levels in regional governments in other countries. And we ask some specific question on local governments, but these are in a limited number. So you will see, for example, that this time, for the first time, we ask also to distinguish between the national civil service force and the regional or the state ones. Some results are clear cut. For example, on inputs on or concern at local level on local matters, this is very clear. On others, respondents are less clear on the differences and maybe it's also a question of knowing the responsibilities of the different levels of government. So that there are a few results on that. I think that the framework itself can work also at the state level, and maybe would make sense also to have a survey that is carried out just, you know, at this in a state or just in a region to see those results.
Monica, thank you. I see a hand raised. Looks like Alex Snyder. Go ahead, Alex.
Thanks, Ed. Hi, Monica. I work on something called the President's Management Agenda here. And so I have a very practical question for you, which is the challenge that we're grappling with. So I put in the chat a database that we have about service level trust. So when people are interacting with a specific service with government, sort of how after that transaction, whether that led them to trust more or less and why. And essentially, like, the results are pretty good in terms of like their trust based on that service. The challenge that we have, which I imagine a lot of countries do, certainly this one, is kind of the accumulation of people's experience with government is not, it's less than the sum of its parts. And so what we're trying to do at the end of this administration is think about how do we package all these individual experiences, which are largely positive with government, in a way that's compelling, in a way that people sort of, their views on government essentially are influenced not by the sort of the larger package and sort of the themes of this. And so I'm curious if you have any advice for, you know, a country like ours, where people's individual experience with government is actually fairly positive, but it's sort of the collective sort of zeitgeist around government, which is a little bit negative. How to sort of shift that?
Now, this is a very interesting question, because in fact, respond to what we have done this time in the report, that is the way I presented it, that we separate a bit the day-to-day interactions. That means essentially, you know, interactions that the public has with public services, to questions that are more on, you know, national government or federal government policy agenda and the way that public institutions work, the accountability among them, etc. So we separate the two just to understand also if indeed, as you hinted, you know, the drivers are different. So in fact, you have a positive satisfaction with public services. It is in fact a driver of trust, explains trust, but above all on civil service, and to a certain extent also to local governments rather than the national government. While there are other questions that are more impactful on the national government or on trust in the national government. This is one part of the answer. And the second part that I would say, even if we stay and remain on public services, with the survey, we do ask users. So in this case, we ask satisfaction with health, education, and administrative services just to the users of these services, although not like you, that you do right away, right? So here we are asking to recall your satisfaction having used administrative services in the past year. We also and we see that the satisfaction is relatively high, but we also see that there are a number of aspects that you find in the report that I didn't show, that there are a number of aspects that would increase that satisfaction even more. For example, on the ease of finding information on services, on the ease of being able to be served in the way you prefer, on the channel you prefer. And these are also linked not only to satisfaction, but also then linked to increasing trust in the national government and the civil service. So maybe it's also to package, in a sense, to package also the aspect that have more impact on trust and not just just the average satisfaction. That is something that we have tried to see. So to better understand what are the strengths that different countries have in terms of public services, and which of these strengths actually also brings additional trust, let's say.
Yeah, and I'm curious, is there a country that comes to mind that has done a particularly good job of the packaging, whether that's sort of the marketing, communicating, sort of like the whole idea of like, it's not enough to do it, you have to tell people you're doing it.
It's a small country compared to the US, but I would definitely mention the work that Ireland has done, which is excellent. The work that Australia is doing is also very good. Also to do that whole journey from the user's perspective of using public services, and that whole journey on that from satisfaction in using public services to trust. Both Australia and Ireland have done an excellent job, I think.
Thank you.
Before I ask Noah Gabor to give us the last question, I want to again thank Monica and remind her that the full available work of the National Academy of Public Administration, Terry Gerton is on as well, is available to you. So at any time, if there's anything we can do to help, please let us know. We're standing by. With that, Noah, you have the last question.
Thanks so much, Ed. Hi, everyone. So my question was related to whether the survey touches on corruption or citizens' perceptions of corruption at both the local and national levels, and its impact on citizen trust. I know the World Bank does a lot of work on this in developing countries, but I was wondering in terms of OECD countries, if there is a focus on this and its relevance to citizen trust in governments. Just taking a look at some of the survey results, I do see that there's a data point around public employees' refusal of bribes, and it doesn't appear to be highly relevant for trust, but just wondering if you could say a little bit more about that.
Sure. So yes, so the survey does have a focus on a question of integrity and corruption. Indeed, it is one of the 5 of what we define as 5 main drivers, public governance drivers on trust, so in public integrity. So there are a number of questions. They are all related to perception. So we don't measure experience with corruption. That's not what we ask, but we ask questions related to sort of a situational question for a respondent to say whether they think that situation would be likely or unlikely, essentially. And so we ask a number of questions. You mentioned one. This is regarding a perception of corruption or possible petty corruption of public employees. And then we ask instead also a question related to revolving doors for elected officials, the aspect that I mentioned on lobbying and undue influence on government, and few other questions. So in general, the results that you find is that perceptions of public integrity are relatively low. So it is a concern, and it is a concern in almost all countries. So that the variability across countries is relatively low and lower than across other areas, for example, the responsiveness of government or the perception of reliability of government, etc. However, as you notice, it's true that when we put all the variables together to see what are the most important one or significant one on building trust in national government, the question of integrity, not all of them are among the main drivers. It is the one on undue influence, and you know they all are important, but are not among the most significant. Let's put it this way.
Monica, thank you. We've reached our hour, and I apologize for anyone whose question was not answered. Two things. One, in September, we will have the Partnership for Public Service talking about the work that they've done on trust over time. And finally, at the Academy Fall meeting, you all should sign up. It's time to sign up now. At the Academy Fall meeting, we'll be presenting the final element in the work on trust. We did our friends at Gallup. We had a wonderful session with Monica today. We'll be talking to the Partnership for Public Service. And we have not ignored all of the material that's going on in the background. We'll try to absorb that into a discussion of agility from the Agile Government Center and trust. It'll be a report for the IBM Center for the Business of Government and a joint report, we believe, with the National Academy. So stay tuned for that in November. We've got the partnership in September. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. There's clapping going on. I see lots of clapping. Monica, it's terrific. Now,
yes,
go to the Olympics. Get out of here and go to the Olympics.
No, I want to thank you, and also for the excellent questions. I will try to follow up if there are any of those. This was really, really good. And I also want to shout out to my colleague, Sarah Coops. I wasn't sure she could join. She's the main author of this report. So, all the compliments goes to her. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. We're finished. Thank you.